Hello, beautiful, light-filled souls. I'm excited to share a very special interview with you today. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you that during the month of October, I do have a special on my readings because I love connecting with you. And these are incredibly tough times that we are going through, with lots of activations and lots of healing going on in the world within us and the world outside of us. So please check that out. And I also have downloads available for those who want to jump in early. You'll have access to a lot of my downloads in the future. But my guest today is Alysa Rushton, and she is a near death survivor. She is also someone who spends her life raising consciousness and working with people to activate their own energy superpowers. And her story is fascinating. It's definitely a healing journey, and she has a lot to say about healing from addiction, healing from physical trauma. She is one of the world's most cutting edge thought leaders on conscious life creation and ascension. So she teaches people to become healers, and she is a fascinating guest, and I can't wait for you to jump in. And please post your comments below because she will interact with you and I will interact with you over time. We love to hear from you, and we love to hear your stories of healing and your questions as well. So connect with us both, and may you be blessed. Let's jump in. Today's guest, Alysa, is someone I've been looking forward to talking to. So, hi, Alysa. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love this audience. I'm so excited to share with you guys and just to hang out in this space together today.
Awesome. Well, a lot of people are almost addicted to near-death experience stories because they give people hope that we go on. They give people healing. I believe they are spreading awakening to some degree, that we are helping to spread that awakening. So I'm sure you have a lot to say on that topic, but could you just begin with giving me a little bit of background about who you were before your near-death experience and then how your experience began?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go all the way back to childhood because I think it's relevant. Because, like myself, I think so many of us have had trauma just being in the physical body, being here on the planet. And even though you wouldn't say mine was huge trauma, it was enough to really mess with me. And from a really young age, I came in very awake. I knew about past lives. I would talk to my mom. When I was old enough to talk, I would ask where my other mother was
Oh my
and
God.
where my house was. And she was very good about not shutting me down. But at the same time, I was getting picked on in preschool. I was getting picked on at school. And at the very early age of 5, I remember I was crossing the monkey bars, and I'm 50. So back then, we didn't have the cushiony stuff to land on. And I remember this little boy like unpeeling my hands, and I fell and I broke my arm in 3 places at 5. And that started off this really gnarly circle of abuse from men. And my belief now, having been on the other side, is that that happens even before we come into this world. We have these things that we've got to work through, and they happen in multiple lifetimes. So I started having these traumas and, getting hurt at school, but it was all at the hands of boys. And fortunately for my parents, right, because they would have been accused of abusing me. So I started in this cycle, and I was a fairly healthy, happy kid, but it just kept happening and kept happening. And then I ended up leaving home at a very early age. At 14, I ended up running away from home. And at the age of 20, I ended up getting a fabulous job at a fabulous corporation, a Fortune 100 corporation. And at the time, I was a high school dropout. So I didn't, have any special education. I should not have gotten this job. And in fact, my intuition knew not to take this job. Everything in me screamed, do not take this job. And my boyfriend at the time said, you're crazy. What can go wrong? this is great. You've got to take this job. But I knew I had this knowing not to do it. And I did take the job, and it ended up that the manager at this company ended up kidnapping me and threatening my life. And oh, I tell you what, it really threw me for a loop at a young age, at the age of 20. I didn't know what to do with that. And in my family, we did not know how to deal with trauma. We just smoked more and drank more and worked a little harder. And I think, like a lot of people, right, we just start to check out. Me on a course of getting sick. And I started getting sick because the physical trauma literally has to manifest in some way. And I wasn't able or willing to express the emotions of the physical trauma. So I just bottled it all up. But it is far easier for us as humans to express pain physically than it is for us to express pain emotionally. And so I started getting sicker and sicker, and I started doctor hopping, trying to get a diagnosis. And I got multiple diagnoses. In fact, I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and then Lyme disease, and just one diagnosis after the other. And with each and every diagnosis, I was given more pills, which I have to tell you, I really liked at the time. I was pill seeking. I wanted that. I wanted something to be my quick fix. And I just thought that that's how we did it. I had no idea that nutrition mattered or what you did with your body mattered. I had no clue. And at the time, I was still working for this Fortune 100 company. I had been promoted several times because I, just poured myself into working harder, working harder.
Well,
And it,
did he face prison time, or did you?
yes,
Yeah. Oh, so
yes,
you had to go through the whole
yes,
experience of
yes.
all of that. Wow.
And in fact, when he got fired, I got promoted.
Oh, wow. Wow. Almost like they were trying to make up for that moment in some way.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes. And so it was a very confusing time. I was very young, and the body just didn't know what to do with all of that. And so I just kept getting sicker and sicker and more medication. And pretty soon, the body, I really couldn't handle it anymore. And I found this doctor. And at the time, she was my savior. And she said, I can fix you. And what we're going to do is we're going to install a PICC line that goes from your arm into your heart. And we're going to do this chemotherapy type of drugs. And it's going to kill everything inside you. That's the goal. We're going to kill everything.
oh my goodness.
That was the strategy. And so I did that. I got the PICC line installed, and I would go and sit in the infusion chair for 3 hours in the morning. And then I was married at the time. My husband would bring me back, and then 3 hours at night. Now you got to remember, or I'll tell you for the first time, that during this time, my body was getting worse and worse. And I didn't look like I looked now. I gained so much weight because of all the medications. I had so much inflammation. I weighed 240 pounds. My eyes were basically dead inside. It looked like I had a million entities on me, and I did actually. And it was a really sad state of affairs, and I was really in a bad way. I used a walker to get around. I wore diapers because I lost functions of my body. And so it's pretty desperate, and I wasn't even yet 30. So, it was a real situation. And then throughout this time, I also got placed on end of life pain management. So I'm talking fentanyl suckers, fentanyl patches, morphine injections straight into the PICC line. It was enough to kill a horse. And on many days, my ex-husband now, Bradford, would tell you that I was riding the line between life and death many days. And it was constantly a state of he was never sure if he was going to find me dead or not because I was so over medicated and so maxed out. And finally, one day I did. I died of a massive Western medication drug overdose.
Wow. And Yeah, I mean, this is so mind-blowing on so many levels. And we know that these things lead us to an awakening, and that it's almost planned many times. But medically, like, what was the reasoning for all of this? Like, I don't understand. I mean, like, I'm sure you go back and you're like, how can a young woman be put through all of this?
Yeah, medically, it is hard to understand. Turns out that particular doctor no longer practices medicine. The year that I almost lost my life for good, well, in total, she had killed 33 people. And that particular year, she had lost three patients. So I think the 333 is an
Oh,
interesting thing. And I was probably going to be the fourth had my husband not found me dead on the toilet. And so the style of medicine she practiced was kill everything. And if you can survive it as a human being, then hopefully you'll get better.
oh,
But I think it's important too for me to say this. I sought that out. I had a bazillion different options. Yes, it was back in the 2000s, and we didn't know then what we know now about nutrition and all of that. But I had doctors say, "Hey, have you thought about changing your diet? Hey, have you thought about quitting smoking?" Because I was a 2 pack a day smoker. Hey, have you thought about quitting drinking? And I didn't want to listen to any of it. So while it's true that what the doctor was doing wasn't actually right, I also have to take a lot of responsibility for the choices that I made to align with that treatment protocol.
yeah. Well, that is intense. So the physical part, very intense. I'm always amazed by the spiritual part. What happened when you left your body? What happened?
Yes. Well, that's the fun part.
I know, right?
Thankfully, when we think about dying, I think there's so many thoughts around dying, but really it is like birthing. And just like a birth, there's so many different styles of birth you can have. There's births that are easy and births that are incredibly difficult, and everything in between. And the same is true when you pass out of this body. And you have these all sorts of different experiences, and each one specifically designed for you to feel supportive and to take you in the direction that you're to go next. Not everybody goes to the same place. And in fact, there's billions and billions and trillions of points of light that you can go into. So for me, when I died, I did not see the pearly gates. I did not have any family to greet me. There was none of that, but I did come up and out of the body, and it was the most expansive physical thing I've ever done without a body. It was so joyful and so delicious and so just like I could stretch in every different direction. I felt electrical and elastic in nature. I was this light body, and I felt one with all that was. In fact, I felt like I was all that was. And I was kind of going like an upward motion. And I got into this place where the best way I can describe it is, if you've ever seen one of those movies where a person's looking at all these different security cameras, it was like that, but it was bubbles. I was seeing all of these different experiences. So I could see your experience and that plant behind you's experience and the couch's experience and the little grain of dust. It was all feeding back in a loop to my consciousness, but I could extend out and stretch out and really feel and sense what those things were feeling. I saw the planet Earth and everything on the planet Earth. I saw all of our Milky Way. I saw, other beings like Pleiadians and Arcturians and Lyrians and Sirians and all the ends. I saw things that we don't even really have languaging for. I saw how our Milky Way is mapped out, and to me, I got shown that we exist on like this flat plane that is a grid structure, and then I saw all of the Milky Way sort of extending out, and the planets and stars would kind of like depending on their gravitational weight would dip down the flat plane a little bit. I got to see how sound and light frequency work together to inform matter and to create geometrical shapes to then inform our bodies.
And as you were seeing all this, did you feel as if the creator or God was showing you this, or was it just you feeling a part of it and the light informed all of it?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't separate from God. I felt like I was God. I felt like I was up in that consciousness and moving up more. So what we might call God, I felt on the other side that there was other energies even more than that energy.
Wow, explain that a little bit more. So, kind of our concept of this earth. So, you're saying beyond that, a consciousness that held it all.
Yeah, how I saw and felt it. So if you can imagine, in my experience, God consciousness was the center of the Milky Way,
Yeah.
our universe that we know. And I felt as if there were other God consciousnesses that were outside of our Milky Way universe that I was going to get to go to, except I got sidetracked. So I
Wow.
I got sidetracked. I was exploring all these things and stretching my consciousness in every single possible direction. And then I got sidetracked and I saw this ball of light, just like the others, but it really stood out to me. And I pulled 100% of my consciousness down into this ball. And all of a sudden, I pop out of that experience and boom, I'm on Earth. And I'm back on Earth. I feel more like Alyssa. I'm in not the body that I died in. I didn't have a body, but I had a feeling like my image was more like I was when I was 24 or 23. So I then went to talk to an old boyfriend and found out I couldn't talk to him. And so I went and talked to another boyfriend and found out I could be around, but I couldn't interact. And everything was this olive green color. Everything had this olive, drabby olive green color. And it wasn't actually until five some years later when I was reading a book by Savannah Arienta. And she talked about this olive drab world, which is the astral plane. And in her book, she said it's where people go that don't find the light and die of drug overdoses, suicides, and really kind of instant hard traumas. And so I ended up there on the astral plane, and I probably would have been an astral plane energy, entity, ghost, whatever you want to call it, except for the fact that this group consciousness came to me and said, hey, you can come back to the earth plane or you can stay here. If you stay here, you'll be here for a long time, but it'll be very healing for you. But if you want to come back to the earth, you have to come back now, but it'll be, one of the hardest things you've ever done. And in an instant, and that's a really big key on the other side, is you instantaneously create. And that's, by the way, what we're learning to do down here. We're learning to manage our creational state because up there it's instantaneous. And I thought, yes, I want to go back. And as soon as I thought, yes, it was as if somebody had dropped me off a 1,000-story building and just slammed me down in my body. And there I was, waking up, coming back, gulping for air on the toilet with 6 EMTs in front of me, my husband beside me. Yeah.
So many questions, and I feel like other people's questions coming through, but I do understand what you're saying about realms, that, but I also believe, just like you said, there's healing there and that you can progress. You're not stuck forever in one place, that, there are people who maybe learn a short amount of time from that and then transition to a deeper healing. I sometimes feel souls just almost held in a cocoon of God's light, like almost like they're held in a healing pod for a time, just like this earth was so traumatic for them that they need to be rebuilt again. So there's all types of experiences, but that astral plane, experience is, could you say a little bit more about that, like what you've learned of it, and maybe to comfort people who are afraid that their loved one might end up there?
Yeah, if you know, if that happens, to your point, it's not a forever thing at all. It's a healing place where that, for me, it felt very comforting. It felt very healing. I was happy to be there. And so it was lovely. And I think I would have been content to be there for a long time. But to think that something lasts forever in the universe is a false notion. Nothing lasts forever. In fact, time doesn't even last forever. It's happening all in the now moment. And there's multiple things happening in the now moment, just like there's multiple versions of Earth, multiple versions of you happening all in the now moment. And they're just kind of stacked one on top of the other. So just know that what happens on the other side when we pass over is our consciousness gets exactly what it needs to go to the next phase, whatever that might be. And I kind of think of it like a kid in school who, no matter what they need, they're going to get. So if they need to stay back a grade, they do that. If they need to advance forward several grades because they maybe are too fast for that grade, they'll do that. And the very same thing happens with the universe. It's a loving, very intelligent system that really doesn't allow you to move forward before you're ready. And so you'll get to go back and do things again. You're given second, third, fourth, 10 millionth chances to keep the learning going. And on the other side, too, one of the things that I experienced is there was no sense of judgment. We experience things here on the earth very much as this is bad, this is good, that's right, and that's wrong. And on the other side, it was a sense of learning and expanding consciousness. There was no, this shouldn't be happening or that shouldn't be happening, sort of a feeling at all. It was also very much of a detached feeling. There was no, there it just wasn't attached at all.
I do know that feeling. As soon as I had my experience, I just remember not even caring for the body that I saw there on the operating table. Just, oh, I am something more than this body. That feeling was a relief in a way. That detachment allows you to experience all that you're talking about. Your experience is mind blowing. I mean, I have so many questions. My first question, though, is when you came back to Alyssa, the body, did you remember it all immediately, or how was that process of remembering and incorporating what you knew?
Yeah, great question. So I remember coming back down into the body, and it was like the layers of density and heaviness felt so much. And I remember, this is a silly thought, but I remember thinking, and it happened in slow motion almost, that electrical stretchy feeling. And I thought, let me keep the math. I wanted to keep the math.
Oh, I love it. That's great. You had math over there. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and the sacred geometry, and I kept none of that, by the way. Did not keep the math, but it was my thought coming back.
Yeah.
And what I will say is that when I came back in my body, I didn't remember who I was at first. I mean, I was asked my address and my birth date, which I knew none of. And then they asked me my name, and I completely had lost 100% of my identity. I had no idea who I was.
Wow. And how long did it take you to get that back?
About a day
Wow.
ish to really kind of come forward. But I did remember the whole blast of it. I think that what was harder for me is figuring out what to do with that, because when I came back, I got a series of activations, and my first activation was the very next day. I had to go back to the infusion room. I had to go back and sit in the hospital. I just got out of the hospital. I had to go back and sit in the hospital and get infusions because my doctor was of the mindset that we should just dive right back in again.
Oh,
And I know. And so I'm back in the hospital infusing, and there was this man's voice in my head. and again, I would learn his name, but it wasn't until about 5 years later. And his name, and he's a guide, but he's also very much a physical being. And his name's Emile Couillet, and he's actually the father of affirmations. And he was back from the 1920s, I think. And his voice was in my head, and it just would chant over and over again. I'm getting better and better every way and every day in every way. I'm getting better and better every day in every way. And I thought, uh-oh, I might have had a little brain damage over there. I might have a little problem. I'm hearing voices. And then, all of my clairs came on, all of my clairsentience and clairaudience and clairaudence. I could smell disease and smell things from miles away, almost like a dog would.
Yeah, I was
And
about
so,
to say I just saw a cool Netflix special about dogs being able to smell it, even way ahead of time.
yes. And it was funny because, my husband at the time didn't believe in any of this stuff, total atheist. And when we had gotten together, I had been raised Christian, but I didn't really like the religion. So I was content to be with an atheist, and I was content to not think about the universe a whole bunch. And all of my clairs came online. He didn't believe any of it. And we had this pinnacle moment where a couple of them, but one of them was I I was always talking about my senses, especially my nose, and he said, you have olfactory hallucinations. And I thought, well, maybe he's right. Maybe I did lose my mind, and maybe I'm just hallucinating this stuff. I know. And we were driving one day to the grocery store. We parked the car. I get out of the car and I said, "Oh my God, I'm smelling salsa. Oh, it's so overwhelming. I can't. This is just too much." And he's like, "What are you even talking about? You're having your olfactory hallucinations again." I'm like, "Oh, whatever." So we walk into the grocery store, and when we walk in, I hear clean up on aisle 6. And I said, "You have to come with me to aisle 6." He's like, "Why? What's on aisle 6?" I'm like, "The salsa." And we go, and sure enough, there on aisle 6 was one broken jar of salsa.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, yeah.
That's, isn't it great when we get confirmations and those little confirmations help you sink into just a new kind of knowing outside of the body? And it's unusual, but it's real. How long did it take you to just sink into it and believe yourself? And I'm guessing you had to split from him at some point.
I did. Yes.
That's kind
Yes.
of common. A lot of people don't talk about people who are married and have these experiences, and they think so differently from their family, their spouse. There's a lack of support sometimes for near-death experiencers.
Yeah. And part of what I think happens is, as a near death experiencer, you literally break into a million pieces when you die. And then you come back and you have to put yourself back together. And it's called in Japanese culture kintsugi. And you kintsugi yourself, and you take the gold and you put the vase back together, and you're just a different shape than you were before. You're stronger than ever before, and you have more skills than ever before, but you are not the same shape. And sometimes that vase doesn't fit in with the things that it fit in with before. And I just think that's a very real part of having a near death experience, or anything that makes you dig in and do this work and reconfigure your life. You just end up such a different, like you said, you think about the world differently, you interact with the world differently.
That's well said. And I think, yeah, you're right. A spiritual awakening can do that for people where they suddenly just do not see things in the same way. When you came back to the body, it sounds like me, I felt the body held on to programs from, my own life, of course, emotional wounds, but even my ancestors, soul programs. I felt the density of the body. Like I was disappointed. I thought I have so much healing to do. I knew so much over there, and now I have to come back to this. No. Did you have some of that experience where you had to completely remake all of your programs to some degree? And, it was probably continuing for some time.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yes. The cool part, kind of like you, is I saw the programs, but it took me about 5 years to heal through those layers and do the trauma healing work and dig it all out, up and out, both, as you said, from myself, from my genetics, my family lineage, also from the soul level, because we are not just one being, we're actually expressing on all these different soul layers. So pulling those threads out of the soul trauma programs and really reconfiguring things. I was very fortunate because I got a modality on the other side that I now get to teach to others, which is amazing. But it still was a lot of work. It was so much, work and literally reconfiguring every single cell of my body is what it felt like.
Did you work with other people during that time, or did you kind of dig in and learn from yourself? Both, I'm kind of curious, what were those 5 years like? And, do you feel like you reached the core of healing at some point? Because, on the spiritual journey, we often talk about it's like an onion, you just keep healing and you get exhausted from all the healing. When am I healed? Like did you feel like you had a core moment?
Well, let me back up and say that I did both. I hired every single healer I could think of and that I resonated with was my first approach. And I'm a classic overachiever. I'm going to figure out what's going to kill me and back it off a notch, do that. And that's what I did. So I took my same approach that I was using with the medical doctor and I did it in the alternative world. And I hired a nutritionist and an acupuncturist and a massage therapist and a trauma healing therapist. And I was just going at it from all the angles. And that said, I also dug in deep and did my own thing with all the medication that I was on. I was massively addicted to end of life pain management. It's the kind of thing that kills people and they don't really expect you to ever come off of it. So it's super addictive. I knew at the time that I could go into a treatment program and probably should go into a treatment program. But there was a part of me that thought, if I do that quick fix and don't handle that piece myself, I will end up being an addict for the rest of my life. So, with that piece, I then started to manage my own weaning process. And it took me 5 years to get off 100% of the drugs, given that I was on, I mean, enough to kill a small horse. So I did it. It took me a lot of time, but it was such a great process because it allowed certain things to come up more slowly. And I think that in trauma healing, sometimes we really need to slow things down in order to move through what we need to move through. If we try to do it too quickly, it sort of snaps back and we don't build up the new muscle that we need to hold something different and hold that different frequency. So to answer your question, I did all the things, both helping other people, having other people help me, but also really taking responsibility for my life and for myself and for my outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that piece is a complicated piece because I'm sure there are a lot of people dying from fentanyl, and it is a big issue in the United States, and people get what they need. I agree with that statement. I After my back surgery, I couldn't hold down any of the pain meds. So when I got back home, the minute I put a pain medicine in me, I would start vomiting, throwing up. And so I realized, wow, I'm going to have to heal with Tylenol. Like this was rough, this wasn't, but I felt my angels say at that time, if you take these, you're going to be addicted to them for the rest of your life. And you're 22, so you're going to learn how to deal with pain differently. And I felt like a big like gavel coming down, because I had an addictive personality. And I learned, a lot in that moment. Tell me about your process of not being addicted, of letting go of that piece.
Well, as I said, it was for me, it was a very slow process.
Yeah.
One of the key pieces, though, for one to not become addicted is that ultimately we have to replace our identity. So my identity was, I'll do anything not to feel this feeling.
Yeah.
That was at the identity level how I believed and thought. And what I had to replace it with was, nothing feels or tastes as good as healthy does. And nothing feels as good or tastes as good as my connection to divine feels. And so I had to really work at the identity level to shift out who I was being, because your identity drives everything. If you are not a runner and you want to run, no amount of buying running shoes and putting them beside your bed is going to get you to run consistently. You have to first identify with being a runner. And so we have to start switching those pieces out. And so for me, I did a lot of meditation. I did a lot of visualization. I did a lot of brainwave entrainment, because on the other side, I was shown particular frequencies that we needed to work with that will reconfigure our brains and our bodies. So I would just lay in bed and imagine myself while in certain brainwave states to be this whole healthy complete person who didn't smoke and didn't drink and didn't do drugs. And I would just imagine myself as that. And fairly quickly I started to be able to take different actions and do different things. And so for me it was a very spiritual path and a spiritual journey. But to your question of, do I ever get to the core where it's like, oh, I'm healed? um If you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have said yes. And I'm there and it's amazing and it feels so good. And I really did feel like I had totally healed every little last bit of my body. I was on top of my game physically and emotionally. And, my business was just doing really well. And then I got sick and had a very similar experience on a toilet. I know.
Wow.
And so I now have a different perspective than I had. I used to believe, I died in 2005. And like I said, 2 years ago, even at this time on October 10th, because I had my toilet incident on October 15th, 2022. So I really did. I felt like I had it handled. I felt like I was invincible. Nothing could touch me. I was totally, in every possible way, healthy. And what I realize now, to your point, is that we're constantly on this process of evolution. The minute you think you're done, you're not done. Even after we pass out of the body, you're still not done. You're going to grow through other things and you're going to learn through other things. And this last situation that happened to me in October on the 15th of 2022 was so similar to my toilet experience in so many ways, to my first near death, that what I realize is that certain trauma embeds in us. And I believe that this lifetime is a lifetime where we get to clean it out and we get to absolutely clear it from the field, clear out some of those inverted programs, basically, of trauma. I don't necessarily think we need to learn through trauma. I think we have been programmed to learn through trauma. I don't think it's the program that we have to keep. What I'm shown is that just like you and I went through that near death experience where it was our big wake up, I get that we're doing that on a collective layer now. And I have always heard that between 2020 and 2026, I call them the sandwich years. It's like the toughest part of this process of evolution where we're doing it collectively. And if I can make an analogy, I can remember when I was 240 pounds and I was so sick, and I started giving my body new foods and new thoughts and new feelings. And almost 100% of my cells were unhealthy. But pretty soon, some of my liver cells started to turn over, because those cells turn over pretty quick. And I started to create new healthy cells. And then it started to spread and more and more and more and more and more. And within about a year's time, I actually physically looked different because I'm turning over the cells in my body. And so, what I believe is happening here is that we live on a sentient being called Mother Earth, and we are cells in the body of Mother Earth, and that many of us are waking up, we're becoming healthy, and we're helping turn the body in a different direction of health. And so I do see um I mean, since 2020, it's been very tough for people. It's created a lot of wake ups. I've always seen 2024 through 2026, sorry to say, being the most difficult of the years when we're sort of purged to the core. And if you've ever made coffee in a French press, that's how it's shown to me. It's just squeezing all the grit out so we can get this delicious drink. That's what it feels like is happening now. We're literally being squeezed, our cells, our DNA, and it's coming through solar flares. It's coming through planetary frequency in the Schumann. You can actually literally see it on the Schumann resonance. You can see people act out when the Schumann's off the charts and it's that scritchy, scratchy orange color. And for many of us that are awake, when it's really high frequency, like that really strong white color, we feel amazing. But if you're not awake, you'll feel horrible. So
Mm.
everybody on the planet's in their own certain stage of evolution. But yeah, I do see a lot coming for the planet. I don't like to be super predictive because I also am highly aware that our consciousness can shift things in the moment. And even like there's hurricanes offshore right now, we can literally shift the impact of that. The ancient people knew how to do this. The ancient people knew how to talk with the land and talk with the elements. One of the things that I really do feel though right now is that we're in a collective place of breaking cataclysm to reformat humanity on a trauma layer because there has been so many I call it flooding the plane. So if you think about humanity and how civilizations get wiped out by a big flooding or some catastrophe. So we flood the plane and then start anew. And we've done that so many times. And we're now finally starting to get proof of that. Scientific proof is coming out beyond what our written history would say is true. But we're finally starting to see evidence of these many restarts. And what I deeply feel and have been shown is that we are coming through a time where we don't have to have the plane flooded and have the cataclysm to evolve our consciousness. We can do it in motion. And I love this, you nodding like that. It's
I've
great.
I've been feeling that too. I've been asking my guides, and it is kind of funny because as you awaken, some people it looks like they're losing their mind, but to go from 0 to 100, just within themselves, of course they're going to be shocked if everything is falling apart within them. It's going to take them a moment to get their footing. If you've been used to, like clearing a lot of this, it's not as bad. You know what's going on. You feel protected from your guides, and okay, this is going to be a tough time. Breathe through it. And I think you're exactly right that we are learning to hold humanity in our consciousness, to hold light for other people and go, we can do this. We can do this. We can release together. We can ascend together. Come on. Like it's this sense of light literally spreading from person to person, location to location. And it takes a while for it to filter up, but it is spreading at ground level.
Yeah. And just like with like I always go back to my body. My body needed some time to go through that healing and evolution process of enough cells getting healthy and then spreading the signal out to the other cells and bringing in the information of the nutrition. So, what's so cool is so many people now on this planet are having these conversations and having conversations of awakening, and we are spreading. And just like the pan of popcorn, you get the early popcorn pops, and they help the rest of the pan. They create enough heat in the pan to help the rest of the popcorn pop. And that's just what's happening right now. And it's such a cool process. And I, for one, am really excited about what it's going to look like. I see there's a lot of different potentials in the field of
Yeah.
how it'll all turn out in the end, but I'm always in the place where I'm encouraging myself every day and others to really be in the vision of what we want to create versus talking in the conversation of what we're afraid of or what could happen. The first rule of race car driving is look where you want to go, not to the wall you're spinning out and possibly going to hit. So if we keep our focus and we remember that we're quantum creators and we're impressing our consciousness on the consciousness field, everything then makes sense, and we can work with the weather, and we can work with situations, and we can work with leaders of nations, in fact, and influence that. There's a real there's a document, a CIA document. It's called thought transference, or the document's not called thought transference, but there's in the document, there's a whole write up about thought transference, and you can literally influence things with your thoughts. And it is a very real practice, but you can use it for good. Is is my is my guidance. Use it for good, and do things like talk to the weather and talk to, people's spirits energetically and see them as beings of light versus, one of the things in the spiritual community that I notice is there's such a separational dialogue of these ones aren't going to ascend, these ones aren't going to, these ones over here are good and these ones over here are bad. And I feel like one of the reasons I came back specifically is if you had seen me 20 years ago, you would have said, she will never wake up, ever. She will probably die and not evolve at all. You would have counted me out completely. And for me, that's the most important part, is to not count any of our fellow humans out. If one of us is divine, it means we all are. We're all from the same source. Just because you cut a slice of peach pie out of the peach pie does not make it not peach pie when you put it on the plate. It's still peach pie. It just is cut off from its wholeness. And so I really think the most we can do to help humanity is to remind ourselves to see the divinity, the divine source, the God source, whatever you want to, whatever the word is for it, in our fellow humans, even when they're behaving badly.
I couldn't agree more. And I do tell my students this, and we had a conversation actually, some students today, and one student saw Norwegian prisons. I showed them a clip of, how humane these prison systems are and how people heal. The recidivism rate is like 80% versus ours, which is 20%. And a lot of the men spend time in nature. And I was like, don't you think if you spent 15 years in nature not being treated with cruelty, that you might change some of the ways that you see the world and you see your behavior from 15 years ago? You'd really have the opportunity to heal. And this one student was like, yeah, but men who murder and men who rape, I want them to suffer and be punished. And I said, well, but look at the rates of never murdering and never raping again. Like when you're treated with healing, maybe that can heal in many people. I said, maybe that's not your job, but maybe you can give that to someone else who believes in that healing for others and works, with people in that way. And that's what I always say is like, you don't have to heal everyone. You could have boundaries yourself. You might work in this corner, with this population, but let someone else work with a different population, and let that thought of everyone healing work. And definitely to your point of, we don't know what's possible. Consciousnesses are going to connect, business is going to change. We are going to leave this competition mindset into a cooperative mindset, into an abundance for all mindset. I know it's coming. I see it coming, where one person has a good idea, another person has a great idea, people start working together in different ways. That's the future, because they're seeing it, they're believing in it, they're making it happen. and even in the spiritual community, like we can come together, we can put on amazing workshops together, we can do things that we couldn't do alone. And so I think that is definitely going to change. I also think with young people, the mindset around addiction is changing. And if there's anything you can say, I know we don't have a ton of time remaining, but to people our age who are a bit older, sometimes they're locked in some deep patterns and they see that, oh, sobriety is boring. And I look at them and I'm like, you're not replacing it with certain things. You're not replacing the drinking or the drug use with things that are super invigorating, starting new businesses that work. I don't know, even learning pickleball and just becoming a pickleball expert, like in the time that you would have been at the bar. Like there's all kind of fun things that you can do in life to create a different identity, like you said. And if you have a message to people our age and younger about how to step into that process of really letting go of their old self and embracing a new self, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I loved how you use the word boring because there's this program that says in order to have fun, you must use drugs or alcohol. And I don't think you could be farther from the truth. I think it's such a false program. And I think once people really knew how life goes off the charts with magic and miracles, and just like your heart is just so expanded, and your life just isn't the same. I mean, to me, that's the most fun. And I can't even imagine now taking a sip of alcohol or one puff of a cigarette because I know that that would impact my level of connection to the allness of the isness and my level of connection to the magic and the miracles consciousness and just the level of things that happen in my life when people are with me, they'll just be like, wow, this is how I can't believe all this is going on. And then they realize that they too can have it, that it's not something unique to me. It's not something special about Alyssa. It's something that they too can do. So to your question, I really think it's a letting go of the program of these things are fun, TV's fun, drinking is fun, because to me, those are not fun. When you're connected and you're in touch with the universe and you can go outside and have these miracles. I mean, a butterfly, tissue paper with wings is flying around from Brazil to North America and landing on your shoulder and having conversations with you about how the universe works. These are the miracles. And it makes, I was watching a TV show because I have a guest here in town and I haven't watched TV since 2016. And I was watching this movie and my thought to myself was, do people find this entertaining? It was so weird to me. It was such a different, like, not a judgment, but wow, this does not seem fun to me. This seems really hard to watch. And so, all that to say that there's nothing more magical and amazing than being in touch with yourself and nature and the universal energy and your angels and your guides. And that's when life really takes off and flies. It is worth exploring. You will not find it in a bottle, you will not find it in a vape pack, but you will find this vastness and this miracle network that is really beyond. And what's cool is if you've ever seen a Harry Potter movie or a magical movie where you're thinking, gosh, I wish I could do that, you can. You just have to know how.
I love that. That is beautiful. And my final question to you is, tell me just a little bit about what you do with people and online and in person and however you want to share. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things that happened when I came back is I was given this healing modality. And so I was too afraid to use it in an open forum. So I kind of do it. I had a coaching practice and I would do it on the back end and I wouldn't really tell anybody about it. But my business really grew. And in 2018, I heard, you have to start doing this. You have to. So in 2019, I started officially, and now I have this business called the Divine Light Energy Healers Academy, where I teach and train how to heal at the multidimensional level, not just the physical body, not just the mental body, not just the emotional body, not just the spiritual energy body, but all of the bodies, and at soul level, and also working with the DNA that holds all of that, plus your ancestry. So that's the modality I teach, where we kind of scoop all that in together, and then I show people how to process. Basically, it's a recoding process of recoding your DNA, which informs your reality. So it's a wonderful healing modality. I love to watch people's lives change. People in the academy often, they'll get questions like, "Have you had a facelift?" or "What did you have? Did you go on Ozempic?" You know, and they haven't. They're just, their bodies are attuning to a new frequency, and they're using this modality for themselves. So that's what I help people do. I'm so blessed to.
Energy facelifts and energy Ozempic. I love it.
Yes, exactly. It's a thing. So, and I do believe that the future of medicine is frequency. The future of medicine is sound and light, and that's what we're
Light.
helping people tune into.
I see light as a great healer for humanity. And I keep hearing from my angels, hang on, those with chronic pain, so many new modalities are coming, don't worry, you will learn, you will change.
And can I say, before we complete, we have one of the most amazing modalities right now. Just people are not using it. Going outside in the morning and getting that first morning blue light, squinting your eyes down and letting the rainbow light, that chromium rainbow light spectrum infiltrate your cells, and talking to your cells and saying, "Cells, everybody, good morning. I'm sending you all of this light and nutrition for you to use consciously to upgrade my body." I'm going to tell you something. If you do that, I have clients who have healed their type 1 diabetes, not type 2, type 1 insulin dependent diabetes, healed it. I've had people heal their vision. I've had people heal all sorts of things just with this light pulling practice, because light and sound are our best healers here on the planet.
I am so glad you said that because I've never shared the weirdness that I do in the morning, but I love that early light. So I'm out there with my dog, and sometimes I'll even take a flower or the dew, from the earth, and I'll do my little meditation to see the sun, and I'll put the dew on my face, and I'm like, give me moisture, give me light, give me, like I really just interact with nature in playful ways. And I swear it changes the body to play with the light, to play with nature, and to, observe a puppy, a dog, how much fun they have with just grass, with just being alive. And we can incorporate more of that. That's something, my near death experience said, remind them to go to nature. And this gets so construed in many different ways, but I think the basic point is nature knows how to heal itself, that we don't have to look to a lot of different places. We can heal from within, we can grow towards the light. And nature isn't excessive. Human beings are excessive with their consumption and the ways that they harm. But people say nature is cruel. Well, animals kill to survive, but they don't overkill. They just don't go, they don't create factories and create all this waste. No, there's a balance, there's a cause and effect, there's a a truth to nature that we can learn from, I think, when we're out of balance.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're so correct. We are given the exact constituents to heal our bodies here. We have it. We just don't tap into it, many people, but boy, if you do, just the simple basics, sound in the morning, the birds, the light in the morning and the light at night, your feet on the ground, working with the elements, breathing in the beauty and the moisture and the balance. I tell you what, you make a practice of that for the next 30 days, your life will change.
And you live in a beautiful place. You live in Hawaii, correct?
I
which
do.
which is very healing, I've heard. Has living there helped you heal in different ways?
more so emotionally than physically. My body was physically healed before I came here. But I will tell you that Hawaii makes you slow down. Hawaii makes you match a pace that's not the pace of the world that most people live in. And Hawaii also is like living on the world's largest crystal, so it amplifies everything. So when you move to Hawaii, you meet yourself and
Mm.
you really get to see in a very live workshop format all of the stuff that's living inside of you as a gift to be able to heal it and transmute it and work with it and alchemize it. So for me, it was a process of emotional healing versus physical healing. But a lot of people do come here for physical healing because there is more nature and because nature is more easily accessible. And I personally feel like when we are in an environment where nature is more easily accessible, then the body can really relax, the nervous system can relax. Here it's so easy. I barely ever have my shoes on. And so, but we
Yeah.
walk around in these bodies that need to be grounded. It's a requirement. And yet I talk to parents all the time and I say, when's the last time your child's feet have been on the ground? They've got ADHD, they're acting out in school. And the answer is, I don't know.
Mm.
And really, as humans, we have to be grounded daily, or
Mhm.
else we start creating disease process. And
Right.
we're the only ones who have ever created shoes on this planet. We're the only ones.
I love that. And yes, teaching people to ground is essential. And especially if you're a highly sensitive person, you can be all in your third eye and not in your groundedness. And I think that's it's incredibly important. Well, I could talk to you all day, but I know you have to go. And thank you so much for this conversation. I'm sure my audience will love it. And I will put all your links below so people can get in touch with you. But thank you for what you do, Alyssa. It's amazing.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. And you guys, pop us your comments below. I love hearing from you. I want to hear your experiences too. So talk to us. Let us know what you're feeling from today.
Thank you.